Agora community. How are you all doing this evening? We are back with another Q&A with myself and David Hubert. We are making some serious progress. David and I were just talking before I went live here with the with regards to the backlog of questions. We're actually putting a dent in it, which is impressive. So before I forget to say it later on, and I will try to remember to say this later on, we are going to have to do another blitz of gathering questions from you find individuals out there. So be prepared. If you got something written down, you got something that's been kicking around in your brain, you want to know more about something, then make sure you bring it to these kind of streams. Then you can always reply to Scott's posts on Instagram whenever he's getting ready for another round of these Q&As. So without further ado, let me bring in David and we'll get this party started. David.
Hey.
Hello.
How many of those have we done so far?
Oh man, Scott would know. Scott, he's right there. Because he usually numbers them. 13. Wow.
Because it seemed that a couple of weeks ago we had a pile to go through that was just endless, and then slowly we've been grinding forward like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there we are. We're getting at the end of the list.
That's dedication right there. We made a promise. We're keeping it. Damn it! Now it's up to you, the community, to fill our bucket back up again and make us feel like we're not doing our job.
I feel we're going to regret what we just said right
for
now.
Sure, absolutely. There's no doubt. We're gonna be like, careful what you wish for. So speaking of which, why don't we start off with one at the top of the list? This is the one that Scott was promoting this particular Q&A with online this week. It is it's an interesting question. Let's bring it up. I think this is the kind of question you get, sort of like it comes with the sort of the anxiety of trying to get your first job, and you got lots of questions, you don't know what's expected of you, and you start wondering questions like this. Is there this is from Ender Perez, actually. Ender, I think he's in the audience right now. Is there a speed limit per pose when you are a junior animator working on a shot? Short answer is David.
No.
Short answer is no. Okay, moving on. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. Is there a speed limit per pose? I mean, I assume that you're asking, like, is it an expectation of how quick you need to be able to animate as a junior? I guess that's probably what you're asking.
I can imagine the junior animator on his first job with total, analysis paralysis of stressing about how much time he is spending at this one pose and just becoming inefficient by the fact that he's thinking about the
timer. He or she or they have a timer up in the corner of their screen, and like every pose they try to keep themselves efficient. Yeah. Okay.
It's so. Again, we can tackle this question in many different angles. For me, it's funny because every animator have their own strength and weakness. Mm-hmm. I know that me personally, I was not the fastest as crafting good poses because it was mainly coming from my not amazing background in drawing.
Yeah.
So, but I was extremely fast to a lot of other things. So maybe I was taking like four times. The amount of time that it needed to do a very rough early blocking, but the more I was progressing, by the end of polishing and troubleshooting and technical and all that, I was just like speed running the entire way. So just to frame this question as some amazing senior animator might be very slow at posing their animation. So it's not a matter. It's the entire journey that matters, from the moment that you get your kickoff to when your shot is being approved. That does matter. So let's maybe reframe a little bit the question of what are the expectation of a junior animator in general on a team. I'm throwing you back the ball by modifying a little bit this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a lot on the industry, and also depends on the team. Like at the end of the day, I know some teams that are very production run, and they tend to be a little bit more stringent on the expectations. And then there's other teams that are a lot more relaxed and organic, and they build a team around with lots of different types of strengths. You got some that are really fast. They're able to like crank through the shots when you're kind of in a production hole and you need to try to get caught up. So those people are really great, but they probably, because usually it would be, you'd have to be a unicorn to be very, very fast and also very, very good. So usually the faster ones are cutting corners, right? That's what probably makes them a bit faster. And then you have a bunch of other ones that are like, you know what? No one harps on them because the shots, they might not produce shots at the same speed, maybe even half the speed as the fastest person, but they are consistently nailing the really important shots. So, you know what I mean? Like a team is made up of lots of different people, hopefully lots of diverse backgrounds, perspectives, ages, genders, and even abilities. And that's how you build it. And you build a good team of any type, like a sports team would be the same, right? You're trying to fill it in. So it's really hard to really put a very specific expectation on junior.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on.
Yeah, I agree that usually weekly quota is, if we're talking for animated feature, for instance, it's more what's going to be the reference. And, it always made me laugh when you say, well, we're hoping the average to be 5 seconds, and at the end of the year evaluation, you came down at 4.28. So, you should work a little bit on your speed. Like, this is so random.
Totally.
It's an average on the entire team. And some very good senior will have extremely complicated shots with 12 characters. How do you process that in your Excel sheet?
Exactly.
You cannot.
You can't, and it's laughable because often it's like, unfortunately, production people are usually the ones putting these formulas together, and it never accounts for that. Like, it's like, is it number of seconds per character on screen? Because that might start making a bit more fair and like sense, right? But like, like why should I get stuck with a shot that's got literally a crowd in it, and it's like a friggin' 15-second shot, and then meanwhile you get another person over the corner there who's got this just only one person in the shot, and they're just sitting on a bench, This is why for me it never made sense. I've never seen it myself, but I've heard of some studio or in freelance that they were paying by frame or by second, and I was like, that just cannot work in CG unless you have all the same character density, all the same complexity, all the same technical skills that is required for all shots. Unless they're all equal, which never happens, this system doesn't make sense. What's interesting is motion capture is done like that. When you pay a motion capture facility for the work, you're being paid by character seconds, and that makes a lot of sense because that is a much more direct relationship to the work, right? Work in, you're getting paid for work done, right?
Technically, exactly what you're getting in. You know what 100%. You need to provide. You know that you have one character. You know the style, which is realistic for everyone. You know that the data is consistent. If it's clean, it's clean. If it's dirty on average, it should be on par. It makes sense for that, not for keyframe animation.
No. But I mean, what's interesting though is if there was formulas that they were a bit more robust like this and kind of accounted for some of this, the other thing would happen is rather than animators paying the price for like a way overly ambitious storyboard artist who's designing these very complicated shots and assuming that the animation department is just going to be able to do it, it's like, well, if there were actual, like if you were able to scope out how much it was going to cost like this based on character seconds, then when you're approving the storyboards, they would already know how much that movie is going to cost them to get done, because they can be like, oh, okay, well, how many characters in the shot, how many seconds is in that shot, you know what I mean? And that way it wouldn't be like suddenly up to the animators to suddenly magically pull horseshoes out of their asses, which is what usually ends up happening. So
I'd say if we come back closer to the question, in my experience, what I've seen is even with weekly quota, I don't remember that more junior animators necessarily had less to produce.
No.
But the shots that they had to produce were way simpler and way less characters. So the expectation was the same volume of work, but it was way simpler, much more digestible for least experienced animators.
It's the way it's supposed to work. The leads that are the ones distributing the work are supposed to consider that. So yes, same quota expectation, but a much lower bar as far as what would be what would be on your plate for the week, for instance. That's the way it's supposed to go. But
and I would say the general expectation from animators that have, or any artist that has less experience, that is either a mentor or a lead supervisor, and all that is I would say it's just constant progression. As long as you slowly progress, you ask a question, you fix it. If you end up asking the same question 10 times, if you always paint yourself in the corner for the same reason, if you always make the same mistake, and if on top of that you have a little bit of ego and you try to hide it a little bit, or this is when, you know, some lead or mentor might surrender at some point to just say, okay, we're just going to grind through this production and whatever, and you're not going to have the best you know, support that you can have. So you don't need to be amazing, you don't need to be super fast, you don't need to solve all problem, but just show slow but constant progress as you're moving forward to the rest of the team.
Totally. Yeah, there's going to be people are going to, you know, you're a junior, so there's going to be forgiveness there. No one's expecting you to be like an all-star right away. All you can do is someone had said in chat there that when I was a junior, I remember focusing a lot on understanding the workflows of the company and asking a lot of questions, even basic things, showing interest and checking what other animators are doing. So there's other things that you can do peripheral to just doing your work. It's also being involved and helping other people and
all that. Just be a sponge, and even if you know, if you know something, it's a great point. Ask anyway. Don't fear to, if I ask, I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing or an idiot. No, you're just going to look like someone that is interested and is open-minded, which is exactly what the rest of the team is going to expect from new talented newcomers that are coming on the team.
Totally. Let's move on to the next question, if everyone's okay with that.
We have one in the chat, right?
Yeah, that was from Scott himself. Let's bring it up. What are some of the do's and don'ts when transitioning from film and television into game animation for the first time?
Ooh, that's one for you, Brent.
Yeah, definitely, I guess. one tasty one for me. Well, I mean, first and foremost,
maybe we could start with what's the difference between
that's what I was going to do.
Film and television. Right.
That's exactly what I was going to do. I was going to start by just discussing the differences. So the first and foremost thing I would say is that you need to understand that they are very different. You're animating in both cases. It's just that the motivation behind the choices that you make as an animator are going to be very different, because I mean there's a lot of overlap for sure, and the skills you learn as an animator are all applicable, but it's like you got to look at the animation through a very different lens, because like I always say, you have to think like a designer. You need to actively be thinking about playing that animation, not just watching it, because if it's too slow or like, I mean, you always have to ask yourself, what is the utility of this animation? It's attached to a feature that's supposed to maybe do something, right? Like the classic example that I love to bring up, and everyone likes to chuckle, anybody who's been in the animation industry and games for a while, I always bring up the classic anticipations before a jump, because it is sacrilege. If you're learning how to animate, you're going to animation school and you're learning all the things, and it's like you got to have that anticipation for the jump. It doesn't make any sense if you don't. And then first day on the job, you put in anticipation in the jump in a video game animation, and you're like laughed out of the room. They're like, you put an animation anticipation for the jump. What are you, an idiot? It's like, but I was told to. And it's what happened there was you forgot to remember the context, right? And all you got to do is play the game after you put the game in, that animation into the game, and then after a couple of times throwing the controller down in a mad fit of anger because you keep falling off of a ledge instead of actually making the jump in this platformer game you're making, and then all of a sudden clicks. You're like, you got to find a way of breaking some rules here in order to make the game playable.
But Brent, Newton laws of physics.
Yes, I know. They are very important, but apparently not to a gamer's brain when they're trying to avoid the sea monster in the pit that's between the two platforms you're jumping across. At that point, they could give zero craps about the friggin' gravity. So, and there are tricks too. Like, I mean, I think that the key is to embrace this. You have to understand that there's there's a lot of tricks, and because video game animation is not a new thing. So the pros out there, they know how to navigate this and how to still make it feel good, and not have players be like, wow, the animation seems really garbage in this game. It's like, no, it's like there's you got to know where to pick the battles and where to cut the corners. Otherwise, you are trying too hard to make pretty pictures on the screen when that's not the only part of the job. So to come back to the question that you asked, that would be be probably the best way of summing it up. Is that you do not treat it as the same thing, because they are absolutely 100% different.
So you mentioned one specific example of, don't necessarily put anticipation if it doesn't make sense with the moment of gameplay there. Do you have other example like this one that you've seen, like classic example of, sorry, we forgot to brief you before this gig?
Yeah. So like other like gameplay moments or features that like people, okay, so a classic one is just swinging a sword or a punch, right? You got a big heavy sword. Now, here's the thing. This is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself maybe a little bit, but it's all about reading the room and understanding what game you're working on. If you're working on a Capcom game, for instance, and I say Capcom because it's a classic go-to example when I think of very twitchy gameplay, it's Capcom is very famous for giving a little less, much fewer shits about the animation quality and much more of an emphasis on reactivity and player control and what's the word they usually use, agency. The idea is a game like this, you cannot have again, it usually comes down to anticipations. You cannot have this huge pre-swing, because by the time you actually swing through, the enemy's long gone. They're not even where they were just like microseconds ago. This is even more important with multiplayer games, because if you don't have twitchiness to the multiplayer games, it's like it's going to be very difficult. Now, that being said, some games have embraced this. So you take a look at something like let's say a game like For Honor, okay, which is a competitive game by Ubisoft. It's melee based. Monster Hunter is a very good example. Of course, Dark Souls is also a good example. Those are not multiplayer, but those games are. What are you going to say?
I was going to say, what's this game that is super frustrating and difficult?
Dark Souls.
Yes.
Dark Souls would be the one. Yeah, I mean, it is punishing. It is in Monster Hunter is similar. Like if you choose to specialize in heavy weapons, that is the risk. But the reward, of course, is that when you land a friggin' hit, it feels very, very good. So if you get into game spaces like this, you need to know as an animator, what kind of game am I making? Am I making a game where that's something that the game designers are pushing for, and I can really lean in on the animation and really kind of have fun with the weight of the weapon because it's actually a desirable effect in that feature? Or are you working on a Capcom game and you're going to get kicked in the head because you're making the game impossible to play and annoying? Like, you got to know what kind of game you're making. So you got to be familiar with different genres of games and know what is the right antidote for the thing that you're working on.
So many times the choice of animation has less to do with the personality of the character and physics, but more about gameplay itself. So, okay, we're going to put this big and long anticipation only because we want you to pay the price, because this is such a big hit that the price to pay is those 2 seconds of idle that you're vulnerable for an attack during this time.
Because you have a choice. In a game like Dark Souls or Monster Hunter is an even better example. You have the choice of using heavy weapons or really, really fast weapons. And the fast weapons don't have that problem, but you can like it's all about it's about rhythm and speed of impacts. You're guaranteed to make hits, but it's like a little mosquito trying to mosquito someone to death. It takes longer to actually take down one of these big monsters. So it's about player choice, and it all comes down to making sure that there's contrast between those choices, so it feels like there's a meaningful choice to go with that weapon versus the other one. Because no one likes playing a game where it's like it doesn't matter what weapon you pick up, they're just different skinned versions of the same kind of mechanic. I mean, some people play games like that, but I think people play Monster Hunter because it's not like that.
I don't want to get too technical, and I don't know how much relevance nowadays, but did compression of animation ever influenced how you would approach gameplay animation?
Well, I'm old enough that to say yes to that answer or to that question, sadly, but I feel like it is becoming less and less of a thing. Although compression, what's happening is like obviously memory, but the memory footprint that the animation systems that get, like all the animations when you're playing a game have to be loaded into memory, right? And very smart people, engineers, are finding clever ways of streaming that data in, but animations are a little trickier to stream in, unlike levels. levels. Big open world games they literally stream like levels because there's no walls to occlude your vision. You can't like just go through like the old school like Gears of War when you're like those moments between levels and you're doing this and walking really slow. You have full control, but you can't do anything other than listen, and you're walking towards a door. That's obviously the next level loading, where open world games don't have that luxury, so they have to be a bit more clever. Animation is a little harder. It's usually got to be already loaded for the most part. There are tricks around this. But so compression is still a thing, but the compressions are so good now that they're very lossless. So you can get away with a lot more. Now that being said, there are still issues that pop up from time to time, but I don't think it's much. It doesn't come up in conversation nearly as much as it used to.
Okay.
That's from my perspective, at least. So yeah, it's a good question. But it's all I would encourage anyone who's interested in video game animation is to learn more about video game animation. Don't assume that just because you want to be an animator and you like video games that you have it all figured out, because you don't. I guarantee you do not have it all figured out.
It's funny because it's also part of one of the main motivation that we had back in the days when we started the I Animate Game program. Is that we had some legit amazing strong senior animator that had mainly VFX and animated feature experience. They would go in video game gameplay and they would be just completely lost. And because it's almost like there are some skills that apply, but you have to learn a completely new set of skills. So yeah, there's definitely a transition to be made.
Oh yeah. I got one from Miss Plant. Let me put that one up. When you're working on a personal shot that's not for a job with a deadline, how do you decide when it's done and not get stuck on another on the shot, since no one else is there to say, okay, it's done, stop, put it down? This is not speaking from experience by any chance.
No. I'm sure this has nothing to do with whatever she went through in the last few weeks.
She's actually literally animating her own personal shot right now while listening to this video. I'm pretty sure. That's funny. Veronica, it's done. Stop. It's done. Okay. I'm here. I'm here to tell you. All right. I'm doing you a favor. Just kidding.
It's a good question. I guess when you're just tired of working on it, because a shot is never done. There's always a little something but at some point you have this feeling that I feel that, okay, when your return on time investment, you start to realize yourself that, okay, I've actually been polishing this for 3 days and there's literally probably no one else other than me that is going to see those tiny little difference. Those 3 days would have been better spent to start a new blocking and work on a complete different shot that is maybe super original. That would be a much better piece in your show reel. So you need to, I don't know. I think just intuitively, at some point, maybe you can ask people around to have some advice. But yeah, and I would say just this question. I would say it's better to ask yourself this question than I've seen many animators when they were working on their own shot. They had the inverse problem that they would not push themselves enough, and they would say, "Dude, come on, just finish the shot, polish it properly." I'm assuming now you're in this other situation of maybe over polishing. At some point you have this whole feeling that, okay, I'm either running in circle or making adjustment that might not matter that much, and if it can help, just tell yourself, okay, I'm going to come back on it. I'm just going to put it on the shelf and start something else.
Yes.
If you don't go back to it, it's totally fine. You probably won't. But just to liberate yourself from the guilt of letting it go, just tell yourself that you'll come back to it eventually and start something else.
Yeah, because if you have a craving to go back to it, that's probably a good sign, right? And you also will come back with fresh perspective, and therefore probably having a little bit of an easier time. Like, hey, actually, it looks pretty good. I'm just going to say it's done, as opposed to maybe, actually, I don't know how I didn't see that. And then you work on it, right? But like, yeah, I agree. I think it's always important to have a couple things going, because you can rotate them if you need to, if you start getting a little bit stagnant on a particular shot.
Yep.
I wanted to go back really quickly because Scott had a little quick follow-up here to that question about game stuff. I think it was you and Lico who talked about God of War and how well the play worked because you can feel it. Any other examples? I mean, I could go on for hours about this. And what's interesting about this, and this goes back to the idea of understanding games as a medium in itself. There's a lot of psychology in games. There's a big difference between being a passive audience member watching animations on screen and being entertained by these lives of these characters that people have brought life to. That is an experience in itself. It is an altogether different experience when you as a player are trying to like vicariously drive this avatar of yours on screen, and you're trying to avoid taking damage, and you're trying to do all these things. And there's a lot of this sort of like expectation of impulse that, you know, needs to be satisfied by something happening on screen. So you want to always understand that psychology, understand those impulses, and try to minimize the friction there when necessary, or maybe maximize it if you're working on a game like, you know, Dark Souls, where you're trying to like play up that a little bit, that fresh, like not the bad kind of frustration, but the sort of almost like the sphincter tightening tension of like, oh my God, am I gonna you know, like, am I gonna die, or am I gonna actually land this blow? So this is, you gotta, your best bet is to start embracing it, understand it. There's a bunch of good books out there on this, so rather than giving a bunch of examples, I would give you an example of what to read. There's a really good book I always bring up called Game Feel. All my books are in a different room now, so I can't go and just grab it like I used to, but it's, you just call Game Feel. I would recommend starting there because it's a really good book on exactly this topic, and it will give you a bit of a exposure. And I think it should be mandatory reading for all animators, because hit holds in God of War, I think, is what Richard Leake and I were talking about. This was a new thing that animators had come up, well, animators, like game developers in general, who came up with this. And it's the idea of trying to simulate impact when you swing through and you try to hit something, it sort of psychologically just works to make it feel a bit more tactile. So just start soaking it up. Start like learning that as a peripheral thing, as opposed to just focusing only on animation. I got another.
We have Ender. Let's go that. I'm going down and up.
As far as you guys know, is the animation industry, or does the animation industry have competitive salary for entry-level animators versus traditional jobs? I mean, by traditional jobs like accountants, marketing, office job. Oh, sorry, did I fall asleep? Yes, you mean boring jobs? I think that
it's funny because I'm not that aware of what is the salary scale of accountant, marketing, and other of those jobs. So I don't know what they would consider competitive. You know, every country, every studio, every industry, it's always different. But you can almost divide it as, you know, as a junior, you will make like 1/3, as a mid 2/3, and as a top senior 2/3. So to take simple number, you know, around maybe 35,000 a year, and let's say Montreal market, 35,000 a year when you start in the industry, then go up to 70 a year as you're a mid-level, and towards 100,000 a year when you get to a top senior level before getting to lead. So I would say it's pretty even, like this 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and then you go more on the supervising upper scale after that.
I would agree with David. But that being said, animation, like any other market, is a market. And so therefore, if you live in a city that's particularly busy, there will be some companies that will start throwing more money around. There was one that that happened a little while ago here in Montreal, and it threw everything off because everyone just started leaving all the companies to go to this one company. It didn't work out super well for them at the beginning because they had a hard time. They did eventually put out a really good title that kind of redeemed the company in a big way, but they kind of entered the market right away with pretty big salaries, even for juniors, because at the end of the day, they need to fill seats and they want a well-balanced team. They don't want just a bunch of seniors sitting around. So you can get lucky sometimes if you're living in a hot spot. And because right now it's crazy. I keep saying it, Montreal is crazy, but it just keeps getting crazier. I mean, Gearbox just opened up a Montreal studio, along with Tencent also opened up a Montreal studio. Like, it's like everybody has a studio here in Montreal now. It is literally on fire. So if you are really seriously considering getting a job in animation, you should seriously consider trying to get your ass over here to Montreal if you can. At least interview around, see if you can. I know it's a little harder when you're junior because maybe someone doesn't want to try to, you know, pay lawyers to try to get you across the border, and it's a little trickier because of the pandemic, but we still live in that zone where there's a lot of these studios that are willing to have you come on board, maybe even at least as a contractual employee, temporarily, from home. And all you need is that first job to have some street cred. The next job becomes infinitely easier to get. So take a look at the Montreal area because they are on fire right now.
Yep. Moving up.
look, scrolling. Wait, I don't want to.
We have Iona.
Yeah, Iona for sure. All right, Iona. When I'm applying for a job, I'm always confused about how to identify myself as a junior or a senior. Is there a way to identify it? Okay.
It's again, every recruiter's it's going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
I myself tend to judge more on the quality of work than the number of years of experience, although most recruiters will look at the number of years of experience. It's difficult to describe what a showreel of a junior compared to a mid compared to a senior. I mean, from promising to amazing, that would be the scale. But a junior, by and large, definitely the first 3 years of your career, you're a junior.
Yeah.
You would become a mid usually anywhere between the 3rd and 5th year of your career, and probably remain a mid-level until maybe 7th, 8th year. And as you're getting closer to the 10th year of your career, might go to a senior. This being said, there's some showreel I'm seeing from animators that have 18 years of experience that I would not touch with a 10-foot pole. And there's other showreel from quote unquote junior with 2 years of experience that I'm like, I want them on our team.
Yeah.
So I think the thing to get from this is, if you have 4 years of experience, don't call yourself a senior. No matter even if you're amazing skill, keep it in the junior mid-level, and undersell yourself and let the recruiters say like, holy shit, he's amazing for a junior or a mid-level. So kind of undersell a little bit the seniority level if you can.
I think that doing a little bit of homework on the company too always helps. If you know somebody who works there, it might be a good idea to try to get an idea of like, oh, okay, so what level are these people? Because you can maybe see their reels online to try to gauge for yourself. I agree with David. It is a bit of a freaking gong show when it comes to the actual. There's no lexicon, a universal lexicon that anyone uses. Even at a singular company, it's all over the place, between departments and even teams. So trust me, it sucks really bad if you're working for a company as a director and then you inherit a bunch of like senior animators that are like 3 years in the industry just because they did a really good job on the last project. They wanted to give them like a solid, boost. It's like, well, but okay, but my expectations of seniors completely different. And so it can be a complicated thing for everybody, not just you. One thing, I do agree that putting an emphasis on quality, but I would also say autonomy is another key factor there. I think that I'm a little less worried about junior and intermediate like David is. It's senior, you need to be a little bit more careful. As far as I'm concerned, if you're considering yourself a senior, you need to feel very confident that a director or your lead could be like, look, I have a very important scene, or if you're working in the video game industry, it's like a feature. I need you to like take this and own it. I need to not worry about it. I need to know that you can take this and only come back to me if there's a really big problem where you need me to unblock the road a little bit. But otherwise, I'm expecting not to see you until it's done. If you feel confident that you're able to do that and you have that, and if you don't know, then you're probably not ready. So,
and this is why it's tricky, because that's exactly the expectation. You can get great work out of junior, but you're going to have to invest a lot of time. You won't have to invest that much time in mid-level, and seniors, you just want them to run and be autonomous. Ideally, help you to with the mentoring of the. So this is why no matter the salary or the title of someone on a team, even if they're called a senior, if you have to micromanage them to be able to get to the expected result, senior is just a title. It means that in your mind, they don't qualify to a senior, because a senior is supposed to be autonomous and not constantly need to be taken by the hand.
Yeah. And I'd say that the threshold between junior and intermediate, it's safe to say that if you're doing decent work and you've been getting a lot of good, feedback on your work, and you've been in the industry for about 3 to 4 years, it's at that point you can start considering yourself maybe, advertising yourself as an intermediate, I find. Only a couple years of industry experience is a little premature. I've seen people only after 1 year get promoted on the job, but that's fine. The job did that. And they hopefully give that person a pat on the back because some they don't build all juniors the same way. Some juniors are just like they are reaching for the freaking sky. They're a rocket ship. So, but not everyone's built like that. So just be careful on how you advertise yourself.
I gotta say, I personally really dislike this classification of title in a company. The only place where I worked that didn't had any of those titles was actually at DreamWorks. You were a character animator. End of the day.
Smart.
You were out of school, 20 years of experience. You are a character animator, and you're going to receive shots that reflect the quality of your past few shots. That's it. There's nothing else.
Specifically, not your title, but your lead or director knows you, and they are collaborating with you, and they know what kind of shots to give you, which is a lot different than just, I'm going to make a bunch of assumptions based on your title. That's probably a very dangerous way to go. We all know how assuming works, right? Okay, so Petar has a question. Hello, Petar. Ooh. I'm surprised it wasn't an update on my eye. Is it wise to include, it is getting better, by the way, to include enemy boss animations in our demo reel and enemy AI movement in engine? Because when starting out, we're unlikely to animate the main character in a game, and more so enemy grunts and side characters.
My quick take is don't put in your show reel what, a potential studio that will hire you will want you to do on the job. Just put your best foot forward. And, if you're like, what, I have this amazing idea for this bus fight or whatever, reviewing show reel, they're reviewing so many show reel. Ideally, you want your show reel to be memorable, which means that they will remember it, whatever it needs. Then, maybe you're going to start with background and, NPC work, but that shouldn't affect what you want to include in your own show reel, in my opinion.
So my thought on this is pretty straightforward. I would say that so here's the problem. If you're going to be doing this on your own, like it's difficult. Like how do you demonstrate? Like I'm making the assumption that you're going to show off because you're going to put it in the game, because I think that's always the best way of doing it, because I'm often not so impressed by a bunch of animations of like NPCs that are just doing a bunch of things on a reel. I kind of want to see it in action, and it's a much taller task to get you to understand how to also program the AI. So I know engineers that struggle with this, so I wouldn't expect an animator to be super good at this. So it's a little bit more inaccessible for you to really do that. And so I find the player character is a lot easier to access. So I would focus your energy there, because if you can do the player character stuff, then you can definitely do the other stuff. You just have to work alongside designers and engineers to make that happen. So I would be doing what David said, like play to your strengths. Don't worry about what the job will be in the end. It's translatable, but make sure that you have a way of showcasing the work. Don't handicap yourself by doing like putting a bunch of technical barriers between you and be able to show off what you're able to do. We got any more down here? Man, it's been active. You guys are active. Would you miss us or something? What's going on? Holy cow.
We scared them with the low amount of backlog that we had. Like, holy shit, we have to make up.
They're gonna bitch and moan about it. Watch this. I got questions for you coming out of my butthole. What are your thoughts on NFT? Oh, geez. Really? Okay, we can ask that. It's an interesting one. What are your thoughts on NFTs? This is a very hot topic. A while ago. My opinion has changed quite a bit on this particular issue. I'm curious to see what David has to say, though.
Well, there was definitely a bubble at some point, a bubble that deflated and then that got reinflated in the last few months. And it seems to be going with the value of cryptocurrency in general. Let's assume that most of the audience tonight is aware of what an NFT is. I'm both fascinated and skeptical about it. I do recognize that we provide value to physical object. Like, why is the Mona Lisa worth like 30 million or something? It is just, a canvas with paint.
Color on it,
So we can provide value to anything. And if there's a way to create the same rarity with digital assets, because there's a way to identify, no, this bunch of 1 and 0s, we can identify that this is the original one or part of the original series. I think it's so early that at this point I can see it both going nowhere, and 10 years from now it will be obvious for everyone that most of the money that went from art in general are now shifting to NFT. for me, but it's the spectrum is this large. Yeah.
So for those who might not know, NFT stands for non-fungible tokens, and it is not the same thing as cryptocurrency, but they are connected. They're connected greatly by the fact that same technology backs both of these things up, and it's called blockchain. Blockchain is this very interesting sort of like distributed way of storing data. It almost kind of reminds me a little bit of like BitTorrents, like how BitTorrents are kind of like people own little pieces and they can share little pieces at the same time, and it maximizes download speeds. This is not about maximizing download speed. It's about decentralizing for the sake of securing, so that not one single place or server has access to all the data. In other words, when you have money in a bank, how much money is in the bank is stored on your bank server, and if something happens to that server, then what happens?
That's it.
Money.
No more money.
No more money. So meanwhile, blockchain, it promises to secure that in a way by never ever having it all in one place. It's sort of like what you're supposed to do with your data, right? Like when you're backing up your data, never have it only on your one hard drive, try to have it on at least 3, and hopefully in more than one location if you really want to be super hardcore about it. So basically they are different, but they are similar and connected. Cryptocurrency, of course, is what started using, crypto art is what people started calling art that was attached to these NFTs. Right off the bat, I'm going to try to make this really brief. My opinion is still that I'm hopeful because I really love the fantasy. And I say fantasy not in some sort of like sarcastic way, because it's fantasy because it's like David said, it's a little early and it's a little bit still too unproven to show us the longevity of this as a solution in any way. But I love the idea. I'm very attracted to the idea that there are artists out there, lots of them that are hardworking, that put themselves out there, and people, if there's people out there that see value in the work that they're producing, who cares that it's digital? What's the difference? At the end of the day, we're able to see it. It was work being done. It's unique, therefore it has value. And if someone wants to pay money for that, then great, because that means the person who created that art gets paid, and that means we might have more people out there that could afford to live a life of just an artist, as opposed to being a bit more of a commercial artist, meaning they are always told what they have to create, as opposed to they're just going to make what they want. And like that's how Leonardo da Vinci worked. Well, that's not true, because he would be commissioned to do a lot of work, but I think you get what I'm saying. A lot of classical artists just made art, and people saw value, sadly, well after they died. But that being said, my concern is twofold. One, I do not like I wasn't aware of this until I started schooling myself on this, but I don't like the environmental impacts. If you read up on this, you'll see that there is a lot of it. There's a lot of energy that goes into the Bitcoins, and that's where they're connected, right? To be able to make one of these tokens, you need to buy these coins. So there's that, and then the last thing I'll just say really quick is I don't like the fact that I don't see there being a real guarantee in policing some fraud that could actually very easily happen on the market. I don't like that either. So those are my 2 points.
Yeah, I think on the energy front, that's why there is a lot of hope with the new version of Ethereum that is supposed to take like 98% less energy.
Well, think about that. That's crazy.
I have no idea. I can only imagine that the calculation will be done in a way that it's almost like, okay, you have to calculate a little bit and then you wait and then you can. So somehow it's going to be the same process, but it's going to be late, because right now it's ridiculous. There's some countries that literally like 20% of the energy consumption is for mining, which is
warehouses of graphics cards and computers just sitting there churning away. Because for those who don't know, it's kind of weird when you say it out loud, but like these Bitcoins, like the way the whole system works is coins can, like this money, this currency that funds all of this stuff, including the NFTs, it's created. It's like it's printed, but it's printed by having these computers and these GPUs crunching these crazy impossible problems, and just working away, just grinding. And then so if you have an aircraft carrier full of these freaking processors, you would be a millionaire pretty quick, because you'd just be able to, like, it's just the law of numbers. If you have enough of these things churning away, so it's kind of weird if you think about it.
Yeah, there are so many things. I'm super interested to see where the smart contract that are attached to those NFT is going to go, because that's another interesting that, you buy an NFT and it's not just this piece of digital art, but it gives you access to this thing, and it gives you this and this. And if you resell it, then you still have it. So basically, there's all the system that is coded in there. So if you are among the first one to buy the first 10,000 copy of a new artist that is insanely big 10 years from now, you can be part of those that contributed financially to their beginning. Exactly. And then you're still going to have revenues like, a music company used to do back. So there's a lot of very, very appealing and interesting ideas, but they have to fix this insane energy consumption. I agree with that. And on because, there's, again, if you take that much energy and all of your energy is coming from, coal, you can just imagine the amount of CO2 that NFT is putting.
And a lot of countries that are doing this kind of work, that's exactly where a lot of that's happening. Like where there's 20% of the energy in that country going to this are often countries that are relying on things like dirty fuel. And so it's a mess. It's a friggin' mess right now. But like going back to this idea of like security too, like the idea that, so like my original assumption was that if you were to buy an NFT, okay, if you were to buy one crypto art, someone made something you really like, you think it's going to be a hot item, you spend some money on it. Maybe it was already really hot and you spent thousands of dollars on it thinking it was going to keep going up. The problem I have is that theoretically, because I had Beeple as one of the sort of authorities on this, because he was one of the people that cracked the code, and he's the one that kind of became famous because he sold like millions of dollars worth of stuff even at Christie's, the big auction house in the States. But what happened was he was on a video being interviewed about just questions like this, like what about this and what about that, and he was saying, which is already a bit of a problem because he's not some authority in the matter. He was saying, no. If you buy an NFT, you don't now have the rights to that art. You're just buying a copy of it. But then I'm like, well, but then what's the point? If you're not like, it's not like going back to you can't make a comparison to the Mona Lisa. You could go buy the Mona Lisa and it's now in your possession, and now you only have the one. Now, that's not to say that people shouldn't be able to make multiple prints and copies, and they do. They make series, and that's fine. They're numbered and they're limited. But what's stopping that artist from having series number 2? You know what I mean? And like that's where I think that without any real rules, it's sort of like anyone who's ever played or especially collected Magic the Gathering cards knows what I'm talking about. The value of a lot of these cards just diminish because they suddenly make a card not even playable in tournaments. And it's like, oh, I just spent like $100 on this card, and now because the manufacturer decided to make another run or change the rules, now this card is no longer worth that money. It's like it's outside of your control, which I have a bit of an issue with, I think. So I don't know. It's complicated, that's for sure. Just something to watch. I'm curious to see. I'm gonna have my popcorn. I don't think I'm gonna invest any real money in it, but I am gonna sit back and watch. And enjoy it. Wow. That was a big topic. That was a good one. I haven't talked about NFTs in a long time. Thanks, Peter. What else do we got? Another question? Oh, a bunch of them. Holy cow.
Oh, there we go. Veronica asked the question.
The question. I missed it. Where is it? Down. Oh yeah. Question. Oh yeah, there it is. You guys want to see it? It is still red. And it's still swollen, but it doesn't look like an arm growing out of my eyeball anymore, which is a step in the right direction. It is, it's my own fault. It'd probably be cleared up by now, but I'm supposed to put a hot compress on it like 5 times a day because, I got time for that apparently. And I don't. I usually do it only about 2 times a day. So that's probably, it's my own fault. So you sleep in the bed you make, right?
Actually, just a little bit lower, we have one from Scott that we missed.
Yes, I see it. It's up here. This one here.
Yep.
In today's situation, what would a mid-level need for a Montreal studio to give them a visa?
That's interesting, because I would probably have answered that question much differently 2 years ago. Because, visa, not to say that studio are not going to pay anymore to get people to flying and relocate and pay all the lawyer fees to get a working visa. But with remote work, a lot of them are going to just consider, we're going to hire you, but stay where you are. You're going to be part of our team that is in those time zones. So we will not do all the procedure and investment to have you come here.
Yeah.
This being said, what would a mid-level need for Montreal studio to give them a visa? Well, there's many things. Getting someone from abroad, it's different for every country. I know that in Canada, it's fairly easy to get American working visa. Here in Quebec, it's also fairly easy to have other francophone countries like France to get people, because in terms of working visa and immigration, they're trying to they are mindful about the French speaking culture. I would say the UK, because of the Commonwealth, is probably not that difficult, but then the list goes on and it gets more and more difficult, and depending on which country you are from. So what you personally need to do for a studio to do the efforts and the investment to get you, well, I mean, you need to be good. You need to have a killer showreel. You need to have good reference. You need all the things that any studio will make efforts to get you. The only difference is that I'm assuming in the next few years there'll be less investment by studio to get people on site, as it was almost like 10 years ago. It was a necessity. 5 years ago, studios started to think about a more freelancing or remote employment, and now it's going to become the norm that at the very least they're going to ask themselves, do we really need them? We want to hire them, but do we really need them to work on site? Because if they're working in remote, we don't need to do all of this paperwork and all of this time investment and spending for a work visa.
Yeah, it's the rules, the landscape has changed so much that I don't even know right now, to be honest. I think that the incentive used to be much higher to try to get people over because it was the only way. But now with some companies switching over to this idea of just working remotely, it's like I find that kind of screws things up a little bit, and people are maybe less willing to spend the money because they're just like, well, or we could just have you work from home. It seems like most studios are adopting this idea that they want to work with people full time that are for sure allowed to work from home, but they need to be at least available, preferably at least once a week, to come in. I think that seems to be the comfort zone that most of the studios, at least in this area, seem to be landing on, from what I heard. And who knows? Some companies still seem to be resisting this idea and think that they're just going to go right back to the way it always was and just go back to. But there's still some restrictions in place for them to be able to do that. There's also the concept of COVID vaccine passports, depending on where you live. This is something that Quebec has implemented and is serious about making sure that people comply with it. So a lot of studios are like, yeah, you can come to the studio for sure. We want you to be able to come to the studio, but you need to be double vaccinated. Otherwise, you're not allowed in the building. Mm-hmm. So it is another sort of factor that plays into all this. So it's really hard to know. I think it'll take time to play itself out to really get an idea. But mid-level is usually not something that I would for sure think that you would get a visa for anyways. Usually you need to be senior level for them to be willing to spend the time and energy to get you across the border. Most companies. Mid-level, not so much. Good luck.
Yep.
It's 5 minutes left. You want to try to squeeze a couple more in here?
Sure, let's squeeze a couple more.
Right.
A quick question from Scott about the Matrix trailer. Is that the one that you're bringing?
Yeah, this is really easy and quick for me because I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, same for me. Any movie?
It's so easy.
Any movie that I know I'm going to watch, I do not watch any teaser or
smart.
any trailer. That's it. And the one that was very tough, but I'm still been able to, is the new Dune from Denis Villeneuve.
I could not watch it.
I've seen nothing.
You're lucky. I don't know how you managed, because I'm too excited by that movie. I haven't been that excited about a movie in a really, really long time.
Yep. I mean, the guy, not just because he's from Quebec, but he never made a bad movie.
Nope.
He just never made a bad movie.
Nope. And he's incapable of making a bad movie, in my opinion. Denis Villeneuve is of course the director that David's referring to, and it's the remake of Dune. Who is the original the author? It's
I don't remember the author, but
Shares
the
your last
first
name, isn't he?
movie was done by David Lynch
Yes,
in
the original movie, yep.
'84. I think the first
Yep.
cinematographical
Yep.
adaptation.
Yeah, the director's
Which
cut of
I
that movie is
remember
long.
seeing as a child, and it confused and scared me.
David Lynch, right? I think he has a habit of scaring everybody with his movies because they're so out there. They're very cerebral. I really like David Lynch. I think he's a great filmmaker, but he's definitely next level. You don't watch a movie for him. Watch a movie of his for light watching. It's like it is going to get inside your brain. That's for sure.
I think the last time I tried to watch it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was super hangover. It was not a good experience. I don't recommend it.
That is a bad
watch.
Not a good idea while hungover at all. Okay,
right.
let's see what else we got. We got another
Ender Paris.
Yeah. Hey, David and Brent, what are your techniques to evaluate if your personal shot is entertaining enough and worth to be in on your demo reel?
Yeah, I agree that you are not the best judge of your own work, but you should have a sense of if it's good enough. I would say there's many tricks sometimes to, if you're looking too much at something, you don't see it anymore. This is why, leave the shot there, and when you come back in the morning, just flip it horizontally. So you're going to see it from a brand new perspective. I would say just don't look at your show reel for maybe 1 or 2 days. Just look at dozens, if not hundreds of other show reel out there, and then look at yours, and maybe you'll be like, oh, it's actually pretty good, or yeah, it's not bad, but those 3 pieces should not be there. I would probably advise to have external opinion as well. Maybe not just your surrounding friends, but professionals that you could rely that, okay, I hope, I expect that they will give me honest feedback on my work. So yeah, just look at it with a fresh eye by looking at other reference and ask for advice of people that should provide.
I got a really good answer for you. We have a Discord channel with a channel where you can put that work out there and have people just react to it right away. I think your peers are a very, very good way of getting a good litmus test on, if you got a lot of people being like with some pretty big feedback, then maybe it's not ready. If you have people that are on the majority are like, man, this is good, and there's a bunch of people nitpicking it a little bit, then that's probably a good sign that it's at least good enough to put on the demo reel. I mean, you've established the first step, which is be part of a good community that's going to be willing to give you some feedback. You can also, I hate to be so on the nose with this, but you can also go ahead and book a review with one of our experts and have them help you figure that out. I mean, that's what they're there for, right? It's not just to review a shot. It could be also your demo reel if that's what you want. You can have that time with, spend it on whatever you want. I know that David Gibson has done a bunch of demo reel reviews. You might want to check that out. And he's quite good at it. He just breaks it all down, tries to explain, kind of take inventory on all the things and maybe spend a little more time on this. Maybe you're missing a few of these things. Maybe it'd be a good idea. And this one here, I would just remove altogether. So that's another way to do it.
All right. Let's go for a last one. I think that we have another one from Ender. Yeah, let's go in overtime. We always go overtime with one more.
I know. Okay, we got. Do you guys think that it's a good idea to start the job search looking for remote animator jobs as your first job?
I would probably not recommend it. This being said, I mean, it's hard to tell because I know that there are some studios that are super well set up and you'll have the support that you need and they have good communication tools and all that. And who knows how long we're still going to be in this situation. Even here in Montreal, where things are not a disaster. I mean, studios are reopening, but it's literally like it's 20% of the staff. You need to fill a form. You need to bring your own keyboard and mouse and all that. All the coffee machine and commissary are closed. You have one-way hallway that you cannot cross people. And they make it extremely not interesting to go back to work.
It's not what it used to be, that's for sure.
Yeah. So maybe your first job is going to be in remote no matter what. So let's assume that we're talking about a world that people go back to the new normal, which is after time on site, after time from home. And you can, I would say in general, it might be a better idea to be on site because you will have more proximity with people that will be able to help you.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a necessity, but it's probably better in most situations if you're able to.
I think it depends on you. I mean, I think that unless you are a very introverted person, and even if you are, I do agree with David's advice. I think you should try, because when you're just first starting out, it's not just about doing the job. It's also about learning the culture and understanding and meeting people, networking people. And that's one of the hardest things about the whole working from home thing. It is not the same. It is not the same. You want to have try to live in the shoes of a director during this whole pandemic garbage, because to try to invigorate a room full of people and try to convince them and sell them on a really exciting idea, it's very different being in the room, because you can read a room when you're in a room. I can speak from experience because I'm that guy. I find it very difficult. It's very, very challenging to be able to like capture a room. And that's not just harder for me, but it's also less exciting for those who want to be captured. You know what I mean? And so I think you want to try to put yourself in a position where you can physically be there, because it's going to probably be a much not just more enjoyable experience for you, but also a better learning experience for you. I think to ramp up and feel like you're really part of the team. You can very easily feel like othered by being kind of remote and never really connecting the way you could in person. But to each their own, right? Your mileage may vary. Petter he snuck one under the radar here. He wants to know if we're gonna have Rick Arroyo on the show. We could ask him.
Oh yeah, for sure. That'll be fun.
We both know him very well. So, do you miss Richard? Do you want him on the show? Do you want me to? Should we ask him? Should we tell him that you sent us, or what?
I actually have a good Richard Arroyo story.
Oh yeah, well then you got to tell it now. You can't. You made me tell my little tease last time. You got a story?
Sure, I have to do it. Rick Arroyo was actually my first lead ever.
True story.
In TVA International 21 years ago. For anyone that knows Rick and a little bit the energy that he has, I can assure you that young Rick Arroyo at 20 years old had the same drive and the same energy. I mean, arguably, he was my quote unquote lead because the project was just a disaster, and they decided to send the entire project to be finished in Asia, and some of the team were transferred to another project where all the cool kids, including Brent, was actually working. So he just happened to become my lead because he was the most senior on the team with like 2.5 years of experience at that point. It was very early 2000s, so it was a different world. But basically, he was not a good animator, but I was way worse than he was at that time. So he could provide a few advice. It made sense for me to follow. And one of the first time I show and he had the pressure of he also had a supervisor, and I'm the new junior animator for first time job, so if I don't do well it's going to reflect bad on him, and he doesn't want that, so he's going to make sure that I'm going to provide the goods. And let's just say that the first review that he gave me of my animation was more an advice of revisit if it's really what I wanted to do in life, because what I was producing was bad to the point of maybe I'll never be good at it. And I remember just going outside, taking a break, and walking around, asking myself, okay, what do I do? Do I quit and just change career? Or do I go back in, take up my sleeve and work on it? And fortunately, I did the second option, because I just wanted to mainly prove him wrong. But at the same time, I also wanted him to be happy with the work that I was providing. So it started a very interesting journey, because it was not the first time that we worked together afterwards. And eventually we both, it was in video game, I was in DreamWorks, and that's when we started the game program at IM8. Yeah, exactly. But it was a very interesting beginning of the journey of our friendship, which started in a very dramatic.
Almost a miracle that you are not only friends but also business partners at this point. Like, look at you now.
He almost broke me 1 month in my first job. He almost broke me, and to the point like, that's it. I quit. It's not meant for me.
The best part. Anybody who knows Rick would, if he was here, he'd be guaranteed. If he heard this, his ears are probably burning right now. He'd be thinking, yes, but you see, it was all part of the plan, David. This pressure built you into the titan that you are today. You're welcome, David Hubert. That's probably what he would say.
I'm sure it would be along those lines, but it will be a little bit more energetic.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. I no one can match the energy level of Rick Arroyo, and I'm a pretty energetic guy, and I can't even touch that. He's on fire. Yeah. Well, we should reach out. Rick's a very entertaining person to chat with, so that would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, speaking of which, it is 7 minutes past David's bedtime, and we got to wrap things up anyway. So, David, thank you for always being here. Thanks for digging through more of these questions. We did good today. We got through one on the backlog, but we successfully answered every single question, and there were many today. So, thank you. Awesome.
Good job, Brent.
Thank you. Cheers, dude. Bye. Thank you very much, chat, for being here tonight. We are always enjoying these little powwows where you get to just sort of sound off and ask whatever question you want. There's no such thing as a dumb question. As you see, we answered all of them, even NFT questions and eyeball questions. We ask anything. There's no we're an equal opportunity answering machine, David and I. So please do write down questions and bring them to these things so that you don't forget. We will, like I said at the beginning of the stream today, we will try to do a campaign soon to try to just churn up more questions to fill the backlog, because it is getting a little slim in there. Yeah. Start thinking now about any juicy questions that you might have. And this could come it could be something that's always bugged you, that you always wanted to know. It could be something that's in the news today that you kind of wanted to, get our thoughts on. It doesn't matter what it is. Bring it to the table, because it's always fun to have something to talk about. Until then, or till next time, we do have something scheduled. Let me just take a look for the exact timing. We have Kirby Atkins. I know he's the next one. What's the timing? It is the 15th, which is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Kirby Atkins. He is head of development and director at Brazen Animation. It should be a pretty good conversation. They always are. We usually bring in people that have interesting backgrounds and something particularly pertinent to talk about. So this will be no different, I'm sure. And then, of course, the next thing on the schedule would be next week's Q&A. And, of course, don't forget about the Sunday reviews that we do every week. If you're looking to have your work reviewed for free, then that's a really good way to do it. You can just go ahead and fill out Scott's form that he usually sends out there into the internets, and you have to just apply, and we randomly choose 3 people every single week to give feedback. It's me right now, but eventually I'd like to bring in some other sort of guest reviewers. I keep saying that. I haven't done it yet, but it will happen, I promise. Have a really good evening. Stay animated, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.